The morning room of Ashworth House smelled of cold toast and older disappointments, and Lady Cecilia Vane was doing what she always did when she wished to disappear entirely. She was reading. The book was pressed flat against her lap, her shoulders curved inward as though she could fold herself small enough to escape notice, and for a time it worked. The other guests drifted through the room in pairs and clusters, their conversations washing over her like weather she had learned not to feel. She had been practicing invisibility for so long that it had become a kind of art form, and she was, by any measure, very good at it. She did not hear Lord Ashworth's study door open. She did not hear the footsteps that paused just inside the morning room's threshold. She was 300 pages deep into a novel about a woman who sailed to the edge of the known world and found something extraordinary waiting there, and the morning room of Ashworth House had ceased for a few merciful minutes to exist. What she did hear eventually was her stepmother's voice. "Cecilia reads too much for a wife." Lady Vane's tone was the particular brand of gentle that had always been sharpest, the kind that smiled while it cut. "It is her great failing, I'm afraid. A man wants a companion for his drawing room, not a scholar for his study. She has been told this repeatedly." A pause, a voice she did not recognize, low and even. "Has she?" 3 seasons, Lady Vane continued, her voice carrying the practiced sorrow of a woman performing grief she did not feel. 3 seasons, and not a single serious offer. One begins to wonder if she will simply read herself into spinsterhood. It would be a shame. She is pretty enough when she makes the effort. Cecilia's fingers had gone very still against the pages. The words in front of her had stopped making sense. She stared at them anyway, because looking up was not something she was prepared to do, and because she had learned, over years and years of this particular education, that the safest response to being discussed as though she were furniture was to continue being furniture. The low voice again. "And her father? Does he share this assessment? Lord Vane is very fond of her, in his way." A small dismissive sound, but he understands the situation. We all want what is best for Cecilia. She turned a page. She had not read a word of it. She did not know who stood in the doorway of Lord Ashworth's study. She did not know that he had been in conversation with Lord Ashworth for the better part of an hour, that he had agreed to attend this particular house party as a favor to an old friend, and that he had spent most of the morning wishing he had not. She did not know that he had heard every word her stepmother had spoken, that his jaw had tightened by the 3rd sentence, or that by the time Lady Vane reached pretty enough, when she makes the effort, something cold and deliberate had settled behind his eyes. She did not know any of this. She turned another page. "Miss Vane." The voice was directed at her now. She looked up. He was standing at the edge of the room, tall, dark-coated, with the kind of face that had been assembled by nature in a mood of particular seriousness. Not handsome in the easy, decorative way of the men her stepmother preferred to parade before her, something more austere than that. His eyes were gray, and they were fixed on her with an attention so direct and unguarded that she felt, for a disorienting moment, as though she had been caught doing something private. "I don't believe we've been introduced," he said. "I am Whitmore." She knew the name. Everyone knew the name. The Duke of Whitmore had been discussed in every drawing room she had ever sat quietly in, and the discussion had always followed the same shape: his fortune, his title, his inconvenient habit of not attending the events at which he was expected. "Cecilia Vane," she said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "My lord." "Your Grace," her stepmother corrected, appearing at Cecilia's elbow with the speed of a woman who had been waiting for exactly this moment. It doesn't matter, the Duke said without looking at Lady Vane. He was still looking at Cecilia. What are you reading? She turned the book so he could see the spine. He looked at it for a moment. Any good? Very, she said. The heroine sails to the edge of the world. And what does she find there? Cecilia met his eyes. She hasn't reached it yet. I'm still in the middle. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but the suggestion of one, the way a landscape changes when a cloud passes. Then I hope you get there, he said. He inclined his head. Miss Vane. He left the room without speaking to her stepmother at all. Lady Vane's silence lasted exactly 4 seconds before it became a sound, a small, compressed exhalation that communicated everything she did not say. Cecilia looked back at her book. She turned a page she had not read. She did not, for a long time, understand what had just happened. The understanding came 3 days later, in the form of an invitation. It was addressed to her father, a formal, handsome card bearing the Whitmore crest, and it was not, precisely, an invitation. It was more in the nature of a proposal. The Duke of Whitmore's mother, the Dowager Duchess, was in need of a companion for the winter months at Whitmore Park. The position was a courtesy one, with no formal employment implied, simply the company of a well-read young woman who might enjoy the estate's considerable library. The Duke had taken the liberty of mentioning Miss Vane's name, if Lord Vane had no objection. Her father had no objection. Her stepmother had several, none of which were asked for. Cecilia packed her trunk in 3 hours and did not look back. Whitmore Park announced itself through the carriage window as something between a house and a reckoning, gray stone rising from a landscape that had gone bare and silver with the first edge of winter, the kind of building that had been standing long enough to have opinions about the people who entered it. The drive was lined with oaks that had lost their leaves weeks ago, and they stood like witnesses, patient and stripped of everything unnecessary. She had expected grandeur. She had not expected the quiet. The Dowager Duchess of Whitmore was waiting in the entrance hall, a small woman with silver hair and very bright eyes, who took Cecilia's hands before a word had been exchanged, and held them with a warmth so uncalculated that Cecilia felt something in her chest loosen without her permission. "My dear," the Dowager said, "I have been promised you read voraciously, argue intelligently, and can tolerate long silences. Is any of this untrue?" No, Cecilia said. "All of it is accurate." "Excellent. Come and have tea. The library is through the east wing, and you may go there whenever you like. My son will not bother you." She paused. "He is not often in the house." He was, in fact, in the house. Cecilia learned this on her 3rd morning, when she came to breakfast early and found him already at the table with a newspaper and a cup of coffee, looking like a man who had arranged his morning very precisely and was now watching it be disrupted. "Miss Vane," he said. "Your Grace," she said, and sat down at the opposite end of the table with the composure of a woman who had been practicing composure her entire life. They ate in silence for several minutes. It was not, she noticed, an uncomfortable silence. It was more like the silence of 2 people who had independently arrived at the same conclusion about unnecessary conversation. "My mother says you've been in the library every afternoon," he said, without looking up from his newspaper. "Your mother's library has a first edition of Montaigne," Cecilia said. "I would be there every morning as well if I thought I could get away with it." He looked up then, those gray eyes again, direct, considering. "You can," he said. "Get away with it. The library is not in use." "You don't read?" Something flickered in his expression. "I read," he said, "in the evenings. We are unlikely to overlap." She thought about this. That sounds like a very organized system, she said. I find systems useful. I find them suffocating, she said pleasantly, and reached for the toast. The silence that followed had a different quality than the one before it. She was not certain if she had offended him. She was not entirely certain she cared. She had spent 3 seasons being carefully inoffensive, and it had not, by any measure, served her particularly well. My mother likes you, he said finally. I like her, Cecilia said. She argues back. This time the almost smile became something more definite, brief, involuntary, the expression of a man surprised into it, before he could decide whether to allow it. He looked back at his newspaper. Cecilia looked at her toast. She went to the library that morning and both mornings after that. It was the Dowager Duchess who told her, on a gray afternoon when they were both settled by the fire with their respective books, that the Duke had not always been like this, that there had been a woman 3 years ago to whom he had been very nearly engaged, and who had chosen in the end a man with a lesser title and a warmer manner. That James, the Dowager, said his name with the practiced ease of a mother who still thought of her son as a boy, had not been devastated so much as confirmed in everything he had already suspected about the nature of attachment and the wisdom of keeping his distance from it. He built systems, the Dowager said, with a sigh that contained 30 years of maternal worry. He is very good at systems. He is not, I think, as good at being a person. Cecilia looked at the fire. He seems like a person, she said carefully. He is trying very hard to seem like one, the Dowager said, and turned a page. The late-night conversation happened on a Thursday, when Cecilia could not sleep, and made the mistake of going to the library at 11:30, believing herself to be alone. He was there. He was sitting in the chair closest to the fire with a book open in his lap, and his cravat loosened, and his expression entirely different from any expression she had seen him wear in daylight. Less arranged, less defended, the face of a man who had stopped performing composure because he had believed no one was watching. He looked up when she appeared in the doorway. I'm sorry, she said. I didn't think. Your mother said evenings. It's late enough to be night, he said. Come in if you like. She came in. She chose the chair on the other side of the fire, which was far enough away to be sensible and close enough to feel the warmth, and she pulled her shawl around her shoulders and opened her own book, and for a while they simply read. What happened to the heroine? He asked. Sometime around midnight. The one who sailed to the edge of the world. Cecilia looked up. She found another world entirely, she said. One where the rules were different. Better rules. Different ones. Ones she could actually live in. He was quiet for a moment. The fire had burned down to something smaller and more honest. My mother told you about Eliza, he said. It was not a question. She told me something, Cecilia said carefully. She told you I am bad at being a person. He said it without self-pity, simply as a fact he had made his peace with. She said you were trying very hard to seem like one, Cecilia said, which is different. He looked at her. The firelight was doing something to the angles of his face that made him look less like a duke and more like a man, tired and real, and uncertain in a way she had not expected from someone who carried certainty like a coat of arms. And what do you think? He said, having been here 3 weeks. I think, she said slowly, that you are very good at being alone and very frightened of being anything else. The silence that followed was the longest one yet. He did not look away. That is, he said at last, an extremely accurate assessment. I've had practice, she said, recognizing it. His hand moved, a small, involuntary gesture, the beginning of something he did not complete. Then, carefully, deliberately, He reached across the space between their chairs and covered her hand with his. Just that, just his hand over hers, warm and still, the fire burning low between them. She did not pull away. She did not speak. She sat in the library at midnight with the Duke of Whitmore's hand over hers, and felt, for the first time in a very long time, that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The season opened in February, and with it came the machinery of expectation. The Dowager Duchess had arranged it, an invitation to the Hartwell ball, extended to both Cecilia and the Duke, framed as a family engagement, and therefore very difficult for James to refuse without being rude to his mother, which he was not, in the end, willing to do. Cecilia descended the stairs of the Whitmore townhouse in a gown the color of deep water, and she did not hunch her shoulders, and she did not make herself small, and when she reached the bottom step and found the Duke waiting with his arm extended, and something in his eyes that she had not seen directed at her before, something intent and very still, the expression of a man looking at something he has been trying not to look at, she felt the last of the old habit dissolve. "You look," he said, and then stopped. "Your Grace?" she said. "Nothing," he said. "Shall we go?" The Hartwell ballroom was exactly what ballrooms always were, brilliant and merciless, all candlelight and silk, and the low roar of 200 people performing their best selves at one another. She felt the eyes find her the moment they entered. She felt the whispers begin, the particular quality of attention that attached itself to a woman on a duke's arm, and she kept her chin level and her hand steady on his sleeve and did not flinch. He danced with her. It was a waltz. Of course it was a waltz, and his hand settled at her waist with a certainty that suggested he had made a decision, somewhere between the entrance and the dance floor, and did not intend to revisit it. They were close enough that she could see the exact shade of his eyes in the candlelight, and what she saw in them was not the controlled distance she had grown accustomed to, but something rawer and more present, something that made her heart do something inconvenient and entirely beyond her management. "People are staring," she said. "Yes," he said. "Does that bother you?" "No," he said. "Does it bother you?" She thought about it honestly. "It used to," she said. "I spent a great deal of time trying to be invisible." "I know," he said quietly. "I watched you do it, that first morning. You turned a page you hadn't read." She missed a step. He caught her smoothly, without making anything of it. "You noticed that?" she said. "I notice everything about you," he said very quietly, as though the words had gotten out before he could stop them. "I have been trying, with limited success, not to." The waltz ended. The world came back. She stood in the middle of the Hartwell ballroom, with her pulse doing something entirely unreasonable, and then a voice at her elbow said, "Miss Vane," and she turned to find a man she did not know, charming, polished, smiling with all his teeth. "Lord Fenwick," the Duke said from behind her. His voice had changed. Not cold, precisely, precise. "Whitmore." Lord Fenwick's smile did not dim. He looked at Cecilia with an attention she recognized as performance. "I've been hoping for an introduction. Miss Vane, I've heard a great deal about you." "Have you?" she said. "I have. I understand you've been keeping the Duke company at Whitmore Park all winter." His eyes moved to the Duke and back, carrying something she could not quite name. "A remarkable arrangement. Though I wonder, and forgive me, I mean no offense, whether a man like Whitmore, who is known for his particular views on what a wife ought to be, whether he has considered how this looks. For your sake," he added, with the careful concern of a man who meant the opposite. She felt the Duke go still beside her. "Oh, Lord Fenwick," she said before the Duke could speak, "I was not aware my reputation required your concern, but I thank you for the attention." She smiled at him with the smile she had learned from her stepmother, the one that was sharpest when it appeared kindest. "If you'll excuse us." She turned back to the Duke. His expression was doing something complicated. "The garden," he said, very quietly. The garden was cold and lit by a moon that had no interest in being subtle. She walked beside him along the stone path, her breath making small clouds in the air, and waited. "What he said," the Duke began, "was designed to make me doubt you," she said. "I know." He stopped walking. He turned to look at her. "And do you?" She considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. She thought about 3 months of mornings at breakfast, of the library at midnight, of his hand over hers in the firelight. She thought about the way he looked at her, not past her, not through her, but at her, with an attention so complete and unguarded that it had taken her weeks to understand what it was, because she had so little experience of being looked at that way. "No," she said, "I don't." He exhaled. It was the sound of a man releasing something he had been holding for a very long time. "Cecilia," he said, her name, just her name, without any title attached to it, and the way he said it made something in her chest ache with a sweetness she did not have words for. "James," she said, and watched his face change entirely. He reached for her hand. She gave it to him. He held it in both of his in the cold garden, in the moonlight, and said, "I am not good at this. I want you to know that I am aware of that. I have been very deliberately not good at this for 3 years, and I am—" He stopped. His jaw worked. "I am trying to be brave enough to be bad at it." "You are doing," she said softly, "remarkably well." He kissed her. It was not a practiced kiss. It was the kiss of a man who had been making arguments against kissing her for 3 months and had run out of arguments, urgent and a little desperate and entirely sincere, and when he lifted his head his eyes were very bright. "Let them talk," he said. "Let them look." "Let them," she agreed. They did not have long before the world arrived to make its opinions known. Her father came to Whitmore Park on a Tuesday, accompanied by Lady Vane, whose expression when she entered the drawing-room communicated a very specific species of calculation. The Duke received them in the formal sitting-room, standing at the fireplace with his hands clasped behind his back, and Cecilia stood beside him and did not move to the side of the room where she had always been placed, the side that meant she is not part of this conversation. Lady Vane spoke first, because Lady Vane always spoke first. "Your Grace, I hope you will understand that as Cecilia's family, we have certain concerns about—" "I intend to marry your stepdaughter," the Duke said. The room went quiet. Lady Vane's mouth opened and closed. Lord Vane looked at his daughter with an expression that was, for the first time in a long time, something she recognized as genuine, something tired and guilty and relieved all at once. "Cecilia," her father said, do you want this?" She had waited a very long time for someone to ask her that question. "Yes," she said, "I do." Lady Vane recovered herself with impressive speed. "The settlements would need to be—" "My solicitor will call on yours tomorrow," the Duke said. His voice was pleasant and utterly immovable. "There is nothing to negotiate. I am not asking for permission. I am informing you of my intentions, as a courtesy to Lord Vane." He looked at her stepmother with the grey eyes that had, over the course of a winter, shifted from unreadable to intent to something that Cecilia now understood as love, carefully maintained. "Miss Vane reads too much for a wife," he said. "I have been told this. I find I disagree." Lady Vane said nothing. There was, for once, nothing to say. He turned to Cecilia. "I'm going to build you a library," he said. "A proper one. The east wing has the best light." She felt something crack in her chest. The last wall, the last remnant of 3 seasons of making herself small and invisible and easy to overlook. It crumbled without drama, without spectacle, simply dissolved, and what replaced it was something she had not felt in so long that she had to take a moment to identify it. She was seen. She had been chosen. "Spring," she said. "Build it by spring." "By spring," he agreed. Her father crossed the room and took her hands in his, and his eyes were wet, and he said very quietly, "I should have said something, long before now." She squeezed his hands and let him have the apology without making him explain it, because she was, at her core, kinder than the situation required. They were married in April, when the grounds of Whitmore Park had gone green, and the roses along the east wing had come back from wherever roses went in winter, and the ceremony was small and entirely sincere. He held her hands at the altar and said the vows, as though he had been waiting his whole life to mean them, and when the vicar was finished and the thing was done, he looked at her with those gray eyes and said very quietly, just for her, "I choose you, not your family, not your fortune, you, every morning for the rest of my life." "That is," she said, "an excellent system." He laughed. It was the laugh of a man who had forgotten he knew how and was discovering that he did. 2 years later, on an afternoon in early December when the first snow had come and the grounds of Whitmore Park were going white and still, Cecilia sat in the East Wing library. Her library, floor to ceiling, with windows that caught the morning light and a fire that was always lit and shelves that held every book she had ever loved and a great many she had not yet read. And she was, as she had always been, reading. The door opened. James came in with his coat dusted with snow and their daughter on his hip, a small dark-haired person of 18 months who had her father's gray eyes and her mother's complete disregard for being told what to do. He had been outside with her, apparently, doing something that involved snow and a great deal of laughter, and he looked, she thought, watching him, like a man who had been given back something he had not known he was missing. "She found a bird," he said, settling into the chair across from her. Their daughter immediately reached for the nearest book, which Cecilia allowed because it was a very good instinct. She was extremely concerned about it. Was it all right? "It flew away," he said. She was even more concerned about that. Cecilia smiled. She looked at her husband and her daughter and the library he had built for her by spring and the snow coming down outside the windows, and felt the specific hard-won quality of a happiness that had been chosen rather than inherited. "Tell me again," she said. It had become a ritual between them, the retelling, the way they handed the story back and forth to make sure it was real. He settled back in his chair, their daughter now thoroughly occupied with a picture book of birds, and looked at her with those gray eyes that had shifted, over 2 years, from careful to present to luminous, with something she no longer had any trouble naming. "You were reading," he said. "You turned a page you hadn't read, and I thought, someone should ask her what she wants, and no one ever has. And then you did," she said, "and then I did." Outside the snow kept falling, inside the fire burned. Their daughter turned a page and made a sound of great satisfaction, and Cecilia opened her book, and James opened his, and the library held them all in its warm and particular silence, the silence of two people who had found, against considerable odds, the world where the rules were different, the world where they could actually live. Thank you for staying with Cecilia and James until the very end. Their story began with a woman being told she was too much, too bookish, too quiet, too difficult to love, and became the story of a man who looked at all of that and said, "Not enough, not nearly enough. If you believe that the right person doesn't ask you to be smaller, that being truly seen is worth every risk it takes to stay visible, subscribe and ring the bell. There are more stories here, more impossible loves, more hard-won choices, more people finding the world where they can actually live. You are the reason these stories exist. Thank you for being here.